Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Riska Rahmawati. In this occasion, I would like to talk about verb phrase. As we learn about syntax, grammar, and English language, we would face categories such as noun phrase, verb phrase, and a verb group, and an adjective phrase, and other categories. So here I would like to talk deeper about verb phrase in sentence and tree diagram. Okay, let's start with the definition of verb and verb phrase. Do you know what is verb and what is verb phrase? Alright, the first we talk about the definition of verb. Verbs are words that are used to describe an action. A sentence can only be considered complete whether it has at least one verb on it. And the verb can either be an action verb or linking verb that links the sentence subject to additional information regarding to the subject. And the next is definition of verb phrase. A verb phrase can be defined as a part of clause or sentence comprises a verb. At the same time, it describes more information about the subject. It can also be described as a phrase that acts as an adjective or adverb and comprises a verb and its complements, which may be either modifiers or objects. Alright, we have 7 main points that we will discuss together, which are, the first is transitive verb, and then intransitive verb, the transitive verb, intensive verb, and then complex transitive verb, and then prepositional verb, and imperative, which all of that are related to the use of verb phrase. Alright, the first main topic that we will discuss is transitive verb. Transitive verb simply express an action and are followed by a direct object. Direct object here can be a thing or person that receives the verb's action. The example of a transitive verb is really easy to determine, or we can easy to notice it that it is a kind of transitive verb. The examples such as buy, bring, borrow, eat, buy, clean, and then discuss, feed, hug, left, over, price, prime, send, tease, write, and want, and etc. There are too many transitive verbs that we commonly use to express about an action because it's followed by an object. Okay, let's discuss further about transitive verb by looking at the example. Here we have the sentence, the dog found a bone. The dog here is a noun phrase, which the is the terminal and dog is a noun. And then found the bone is part of verb phrase with found as a transitive verb because it is followed by a direct object, which is a bone. A bone here is noun phrase with a as the terminal and bone as a noun. this sentence, the dog functioned as subject and found the bone as a predicate. The next point we will discuss is about intransitive verb. Intransitive verb is the opposite of transitive verb. Intransitive verb is a verb that also expresses an action but is not followed by an object or doesn't take an object. Example of intransitive verb such as agree, arrive, continue, cry, die, float, grow, happen, laugh, lie, listen, panic, smile, talk, work, yell, and etc. We can easily notice that it is intransitive verb by looking at the sentence structure. If it doesn't have an object, so it is intransitive verb. And if it is has an object, it is transitive verb. Alright, let's look directly to the example of an intransitive verb in a sentence. We have a sentence here. She spoke very loudly. She in this sentence is a part of a noun phrase. Noun phrase has branch to pronoun because she is a part of pronoun, not noun. So we have pronoun in this noun phrase. And then spoke very loudly is part of verb phrase. With spoke is an intransitive verb because it doesn't take an object after it, and then very loudly is part of adverb phrase. With very as a degree, which describe about the adverb, and loudly is the adverb of manner. So very loudly is the part of an adverb phrase, and adverb phrase is part of verb phrase. So instead of we have a noun phrase as the part of verb phrase, we have adverb phrase or a prepositional verb, a prepositional phrase when we have an intransitive verb here. So when we have intransitive verb in a sentence, we commonly have adverb phrase or prepositional phrase instead of noun phrase. And then we have the transitive verb. The transitive verb is a verb that requires two objects, which is direct object and indirect object. A direct object is an object which can answer the question of who and what, while an indirect object is an object that can answer a question such as to whom, or for what. The example, Roy told the children a story. Roy functioned as a subject and told as a verb, and then the children is an indirect object and a story is a direct object. When the children is an indirect object because it can answer the question of to whom, or of for what. The example, for whom Ray told a story. So the answer, Ray told story for the children. And then a story is a direct object because it can answer the question of who or word. The example, what is Ray told to the children? So it can be answer as Ray told a story to the children. Alright, let's look to the example of the transitive verb. Here we have a sentence. The staff sent the general a message. The staff in the sentence is part of noun phrase with the as determiner and staff as a noun. And then sent the general a message are part of verb phrase with sent as the transitive verb because it needs or it takes two objects, and then the general here is part of noun phrase with the as determiner and general as noun, and then a message as the part of second noun phrase with a as determiner and message as noun. The general here is an indirect object and a message as a direct object. Why the general is indirect object and a message is a direct object? Because the general doesn't text directly the verb's action, but a message, the one that texts directly the verb's action. We can distinguish between direct and indirect object by change the position of those two objects. For example, the staff sent a message to the general. We can look here. We need a preposition before the general because it is indirect object. We need to add preposition before indirect object when we change the position of those both objects. But we don't need to take or to add a preposition before a direct object. Here we don't need to take preposition before a message. So we can distinguish by change the position and put a preposition before the indirect object. Alright, now let's discuss about intensive verb. Now same with transitive, intransitive, and transitive that we already know and familiar with them. Intensive verb, we commonly know it as linking verb or copular verb. The sentence that consists of intensive verb has following structure: subject plus linking verb plus subject complement. The subject complement can be a noun, an adjective, an adverb, or prepositional phrase. The example of intensive verb such as be, seen, came, look, and etc. Okay, let's look to the example of the tree diagram of intensive verb. Here we have a sentence: Chris became a doctor. Chris in the sentence is part of noun phrase, and Chris itself is noun. And then became a doctor is part of verb phrase with became as the intensive verb, and a doctor is a part of noun phrase with a as determiner and doctor as noun. A doctor here in this sentence, the function as subject complement that describe about the subject Chris. So a doctor here is subject complement of the subject Chris. In this sentence, we have an intensive verb became and a subject complement noun. Next, we talk about complex transitive verb. It is kind of verb which requires object complement. When we talked about intensive verb before, we use subject complement to form a sentence, but it is complex transitive verb which requires object complement to form a sentence. So let's look to the example. Kate told John a fool. Kate here as subject, told as a verb, and John here as direct object. And then a fool as object complement which describe about the object John. So a fool here, the function is to describe or give explanation more about the object John. Alright, let's look to the tree diagram of complex transitive verb. Here we have a sentence, Felix puts the car in the garage. Felix here is the part of noun phrase with Felix the category of noun. And then puts the car in the garage is the part of verb phrase with put is complex transitive verb and the car is noun phrase with the as determiner and car as noun. And then in the garage is part of prepositional phrase with in as preposition and the garage is part of noun phrase with the as determiner and garage as noun. In this sentence, we have preposition phrase as the object complement of the car. So in the garage is preposition phrase as the object complement of the object the car. The next point we will discuss is about prepositional verb. A prepositional verb requires a preposition phrase such as glance, lean, and river became glance at, lean on, river to, and etc. The function of prepositional phrase in this sentence is as prepositional object. Okay, we have a sentence or tree diagram of prepositional verb. Sam leans on the wall. In this sentence, Sam is part of a noun phrase with no determiner, so just noun. And then leans on the wall is part of verb phrase with leans is verb or complex verb, and then on the wall is part of prepositional phrase with on as the preposition, and then the wall as the noun phrase with the as the determiner and wall as noun. Why leans here is a complex transitive verb? Because the preposition on is refers to the object. So the preposition in this sentence refer to the object. So the verb that used is complex transitive verb. Alright, we are on the last part of this discussion, it is about imperative. Imperative is used to give a command or instruction. Commonly, imperative sentence doesn't require a subject and usually use transitive verb. Okay, look to the example of the tree diagram of imperative sentence. Imperative sentence here is close the door slowly. We can clearly see that this sentence doesn't have subject as the noun phrase, so the whole sentence is just a part of verb phrase with close as the transitive verb and then the door as the part of noun phrase with the as the determiner and door as noun, and then slowly is part of adverb phrase with slowly itself is the category of adverb. And in the imperative sentence, it can consist of verb, noun phrase, and adverb phrase, or it just consists of verb and noun phrase. Alright, that's all from me about verb phrase. Sorry for all the mistakes. Thank you. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.